The Great Barrier Reef, the beauty of nature and the tragedy of death. Some background information on the Great Barrier Reef. Well, for one, it's considered one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. This is also along with the pyramids. It's also the largest living structure in the world, and it is so large that, according to the Great Barrier Reef Foundation, it can be seen from outer space. Because of this beautiful place, over 2 million tourists are brought in yearly, which helps support over 60,000 jobs in Australia and contributes annually over $6 billion to the Australian economy. As well, it was World Heritage listed in 1981. According to Bauer and Andrea from the Queensland Museum website, under the title Importance of Coral Reefs, there are several functions of coral reefs. For one, they're there to protect the coastlines from damaging storms and wave action. So, in other words, when a hurricane comes, it can help minimize the effects to the mainland, or when things like tsunamis or large wave problems come in, the reef kind of acts as a barrier. As well, it provides a great amount of habitats and shelter for several marine organisms, specifically over 400 different types of coral and thousands of different types of fish and marine life. It's also a huge source of nitrogen and other essential nutrients for marine food chains, which is essential for the coral and for all the different fish species that live there. As well, it assists in carbon and nitrogen fixing and helps with nutrient recycling. This is blue coral, just one type of the 400 plus different types of coral on the reef. As well, this is a sea pen, which is another type of coral on the reef. And this is a hard type of coral, sclerotinia, which is what the reef is specifically made of, whereas the sea pin was soft coral and the blue coral was soft coral. As well, the hexacoral is also a hard coral, or an octocoral, that is considered a structural part of the reef. According also to Bauer and Andrew on the Queensland Museum website, under pollution and other factors, there are many benefits for specifically humankind of the reef. The reef itself generates over $1.5 million for the Australian economy every year through fishing and tourism. This includes commercial fishing and indigenous fishing. The fishing industry depends on the reef because so many fish are born there that are only native to that area, and then young fish of other types stay there when they're young before they move out to open waters with their maturity. As well, the reef offers a great place for scientists to study and make scientifically testable records of climatic events over the past million or so years, including records of recent storms and human impacts that are recorded by the change in coral growth patterns. As well, according to Squarks.com, there are many impacts that come from tourism. On the positive side, tourism of the Great Barrier Reef provides awareness for the reef. It also increases revenue for local communities and also raises money for the upkeep of the marine park. And it also spreads awareness of the importance of the delicate ecosystem at the reef. But on the negative side of the argument, with more people in one area, it creates a higher demand for natural resources and causes overusage of natural resources and creates more waste and population. And as well, some people cause physical damage to the reef. As well, industrialization, according to the article Great Barrier Reef from the Wildlife and Environmental Conservation Organization, the expansion of several ports, including things such as coal, leads to dredging of the seafloor along the coastline, and also increases shipping traffic as it has to ship out to different places globally, and this negatively impacts the delicate coastal and marine environment of the Great Barrier Reef. Climate change as well. According to Squirk.com, the increase of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere is causing problems. Carbon emissions from rapid urban development causes buildup of greenhouse gases, causing global temperatures to rise even up to 1 to 2 degrees Celsius. This also causes rising ocean temperatures, and when the ocean temperature rises, it can cause coral bleaching because coral polyps, the key component of the reef, need a stable climate. Now, coral can heal from this if it isn't long-term exposure to higher temperatures, and it isn't too severe. But if the temperatures continue to rise, they will not be able to recover. As well, according to Squirk.com, water quality, pollution, and waste dumping. Coral reefs require clear, salty water that's low in nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus. Pollution as well from the land is entering rivers and streams and is carried to the oceans, which carries in dangerous chemicals from that are used in our water supply, that are used in our agriculture, that bring in pollution off of our beaches, off of our streets. Polluted water from rivers on Australia's west coast and from around the world is changing the condition of the ocean in the Great Barrier Reef. Around 80% of material dumped at sea is dredged material, as in dirt, sand, and mud. This sediment has been eroded from land from a result of agriculture, urban development, and deforestation. And when the sediment enters streams and carries into the ocean, it also enters through naturally occurring erosion. The sediment blocks clear waters. This makes the water cloudy, making it difficult for zooxanthellae algae to undergo photosynthesis, meaning it will die, killing off the coral who depend on the algae to survive. As well, according to Tim Flannery, in the Great Barrier Reef and the coal mine that could kill it, Australia's environmental minister actually approved of the Carmichael mine development, which is a huge new mining development and project that's going to be produced right next to the already dying off Barrier Reef. The dredging that will come from building new coal ports will dig up over 5 million tons of mud and toxins, and then will be moved and transported and dumped in the middle of the reef area, where this can cloud the water, and the rock coal itself will be a pollutant, causing toxic effects on the coral. And the coal that makes it to even coal that successfully transfers all the way to India will emit more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which will continue to warm the global temperature and warm the water and continue to kill off the coral. As well, agriculture takes an effect on the reef. Although agriculture takes place on land, the water cycling throughout the global environment causes the reef ecosystem problems. About 80% of the land along the coast is used for cattle grazing and crop growing, which causes coral death by the high phosphorus levels and nitrogens, because the pesticides are washed off of the crops and into streams, and then also soil infiltration, whereas animals also create lots of waste with high phosphorus levels. As well, animals, even as simple as cows, do emit a great deal of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which also raises greenhouse gas emissions, which also add up to the rising global temperature. As well, another problem that humans have caused in this area is non-native species. So species that are introduced and are not naturally occurring to the Great Barrier Reef that humans like to bring into the region, many of these species are actually becoming pests because they are either carrying diseases and they're contaminating the seafood, or they're becoming predators to the native fish that normally don't have this many predators, and it's actually dwindling the population at a higher exponential rate, according to Squirk.com, which can also destroy the natural ecosystem if the non-native species establish to great lean population. Examples of this would be the crown of thorns starfish, which isn't native and feasts on the coral, resulting in 42% of the damage to the Great Barrier Reef. This is just an example of crown of thorns starfish. This is what it looks like according to one author, they go in and inject each of them individually with poisons that actually kill them off to help save the algae. As well, cyclones, which is another word for hurricanes, which is what they are called in the southern hemisphere, also have an impact on the reef. According to Anne Hayden, in her article on how cyclones impact the reef, cyclones actually develop over the tropical waters, and they gather heat from the warming ocean waters, and that's why we've had so many more hurricanes in recent years. And they gather and they start spinning, and has caused superstorms and increased hurricanes. Well, the cyclones hit the barrier reef, and they can cause segments of branching corals that broke off to settle, reproduce, and start new colonies, which is a good thing, but they can also reduce the reef to rubble and just destroy several parts of the reef and kill it. Actually, 48% of the damage to the reef is attributed to storms like cyclones. This is an example of the Great Barrier Reef after a cyclone. As you can see, there's no longer any color. Everything looks like it's falling apart. It looks kind of like rubble. But coral do have some natural protection. According to Bauer and Andrea in Sunscreen for Corals, some corals have their own natural protection against coral bleaching called fluorescent pigment. So these are pigments that form a shield around the zooxanthellae, which protects them from harmful UV rays. It can actually change the harmful wavelengths of sunlight and UV rays and lower the energy wavelengths, causing the fluorescent corals to survive bleaching events better, which causes evolution to favor the fluorescent coral. And this is just an example of fluorescent coral right there. This is another mixed fluorescent corals, and this is another type of fluorescent coral. So why should we save the reef? Well, the Great Barrier Reef is home to hundreds of different species, some of which aren't native anywhere else globally. And without the reef, Australian tourism will plummet, as is considered one of the 7 wonders of the world. Now, we have the opportunity to save these reefs, so what is stopping us? Well, according to the Asia Times, the economic advantages of coal mining along the reef and lowering electricity costs because of the coal is considered more beneficial, more necessary to the Australian government than actually protecting the reef and its inhabitants. As well, the tourism and the money made from it and the lack of enforcement of current laws against polluting the reef is considered more beneficial than the health of the reef and the ecosystem it offers. As well, lack of updated legislation and lack of law enforcement of outdated legislation helps those who do cause damage to the reef to get off scot-free. But how can we, as humans, fix it? Well, according to the article Great Barrier Reef from the Wildlife and Environmental Conservation Organization, we can do things such as finding alternative energy sources like water power, wind power, or solar power. As well, we can enforce the current legislation on pollution against tourists. We can lower greenhouse gas emissions, kill off the invasive predatory species and stop bringing them in, and require a certain mile radius away from the coastline for agricultural businesses to take place. So the Great Barrier Reef Foundation is actually a wonderful foundation that was founded in November 1999 after the 1998 first severe coral bleaching of the Great Barrier Reef, where some Australian business leaders felt the need to do more to protect the ecosystem at risk. The foundation's policies, they believe in the climate change policy. They agree with the Paris Agreement, believing that individuals and companies and businesses and governments are all responsible for saving the Great Barrier Reef. And they do this by prioritizing projects that build the resilience of the reef against the changing climate and working on policy change They also only take donations from individuals as well as companies and foundations in monetary form, in property form, or through services, but will refuse donations if they believe that it's something that goes against their vision or their mission or the reputation of the foundation. Under our impact on the foundation's page, the foundation has actually found a lot of great success and helps move forward saving the reef by unlocking the genetic code of different coral species and the associated algae and microbes, which can help researchers better understand and manage the reef's response to a changing climate. Also, they're able to study the water chemistry, and it's the largest water chemistry observing system, which helps generate observations of changes in the Great Barrier Reef's water chemistry. And they've been able to hunt for super coral, or coral that is able to resist climate change and help evolve coral on the Great Barrier Reef. And there are several other things they've done as well. So what can we as individuals do? Well, we can support recycling efforts. Even our plastics dumped stateside can find their way across the oceans to the other side of the world, like the Great Barrier Reef. As well, we can volunteer to clean up polluted shorelines during school breaks, which could be kind of a mission trip for your next spring break. As well, we can donate to the Great Barrier Reef Foundation, who works on cleaning up the area around the Great Barrier Reef and helps the actual species that live in the Great Barrier Reef. As well, we can support clean energy and alternative energy sources like wind power, solar power, water power, and reduce coal usage and emissions. And this is just an example of cleaning up the shores around the Great Barrier Reef. Thank you.